Okay, Dad, I wanted to do this because I know you spent your whole life as a human rights activist. In 1963, marched on Washington with Martin Luther King. So I just want to get a little bit of your perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Dada, for this opportunity to reflect on the current very serious upheaval that is going on in the United States of America. And in my 90 years of experience on planet Earth, this is certainly a time for reflection and maybe a time for change. But let me just say that I was born in Los Angeles in 1930. And at that time, I had received many messages growing up about prejudice. I'd have to say that my parents and grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins were all very prejudiced because they brought with them to this country all their biases. My grandparents were from Syria, which later became Lebanon. So I had my own identity crisis growing up in an Irish, Italian, Hispanic neighborhood, white. And so, in a sense, we were superior to everybody. Not only were we taught that somehow the colors were inferior, but so were the Italians and so were the Irish and almost every other group, and especially the Jews. Oh my gosh. I mean, I was raised in that atmosphere, and it was right around the time of the Great Depression. There was a lot of poverty after the stock market crashed in 1929. So growing up, I had all these messages, which in one sense was very confusing to me because one of my aunts fell in love with an Irish person and married someone who was Irish. And everybody was so upset. Why didn't she marry a good Syrian boy? And I didn't understand because this Irishman, Johnny Kirby, he was such a fun guy. So why is everybody against this Irishman? So I just want to say it wasn't just prejudice against blacks. Of course, in those days, they were referred to as colored. And when we would drive in a neighborhood that was predominantly colored, my parents would always say, roll up the windows and lock down the
Mm-hmm.
doors, which gave me an impression that somehow these people were dangerous. So my brain growing up was filled with all the various prejudices. We came out of the period of segregation, the Civil War, growing up. Los Angeles was a little bit more open area. But anyway, so I just want to kind of pause right there and say that my background was filled with all kinds of prejudices and biases. You know what a prejudice is? It means pre-judgment.
Yeah.
The word, if you take the word apart, pre-judgment, you're judging in advance without all the information that particular groups or particular individuals are this way or that way without having tested it out. Like when I finally tested it out with my Irish uncle, Johnny Kirby. He really wasn't an evil man. He was just a fun-loving human being. And that started
Mm-hmm.
me to learn what Martin Luther King finally said, in the March on Washington. I look forward to the day when my four little children are not judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. So
Mm-hmm.
I started early in life learning to try to judge people individually, and not by some stereotype like all blondes are dumb.
At some point, you went to preschool and became a priest in 1956. Do you think that helped you break down some of those prejudice you were given growing up?
Well, I was talking about my family of origin,
Mhm.
and which is, very influential on us. Actually, when I was in the sixth grade, I read a book about missionaries. I admired these men that gave up their independence and became missionaries to China or to Africa or whatever. That's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a priest. In the sixth grade, I made up my mind. That's what I wanted to do. So when actually, and my parents were thinking I was too young to make that decision, but I have to admit that I did not obey my parents. I went and took the exam and enrolled in the local junior seminary, and I started my path to become an ordained priest. So the seminary became my second family of origin. In other
Okay.
words, what I learned there was very influential because In our seminary, we had people from all over the world. We had professors from all over the world. A whole new world opened up to me, and I'm very grateful for all the seminary professors that I had.
Were there any African Americans at your school?
Well, we had a few. It was right around that time. See, in the late 40s and the early 50s began the civil rights movement in the United States, even before Martin Luther King. There began to be movements towards desegregating schools, desegregating lunch counters, desegregating bathroom facilities. Can't really believe how much segregation there was, but it became, with the invention of TV, it became more widespread. So there were some very early movements towards equality and towards desegregation, even before Martin Luther King. So, and even in our seminary, we had this big argument over McCarthyism, because Joe McCarthy, who was a United States senator, was trying to say that any help towards the helping of the Black Americans was a communist plot. I mean, that whole period was so filled with anti-communism that we began to see communists all over the place.
Mm.
So we had fierce arguments in the seminary among the professors and among the students over whether social justice prevailed over communism, whether if you were for social justice and equality, whether that meant you were communist or whether that meant you were following the dictates of what it meant to inherit the Judaic Christian tradition. I don't want to get too deep into all this, but what I'm just saying is, in the seminary, I became chair of the Christian Life Forum. We had a little group where we invited speakers from outside the seminary. And I remember when I invited a Black who was Catholic to talk to us about segregation, and how the faculty got all nervous because we invited this speaker to the seminary who was, for civil rights. And it's kind of like an awakening period to all of us. So I was very early, kind of like ahead of my time.
What was going on in your life when you decided to attend the March on Washington? How
Well,
old were you?
one of the things that opened my mind, life is our brain gets fixed in its ideas. So sometimes it's not easy to continue to grow and to change. But every summer, I would use my summer vacation as a priest to attend workshops and seminars. So I was attending a workshop. Actually, it was in Philadelphia on liturgical reform, Vatican II reform. And one of the speakers said, if you have a social conscience after this seminar is over, you're going to go to Washington, D.C., because they're planning a march on Washington for jobs and freedom for Black Americans. Even though I was supposed to be back to my assignment, and even though it was not permitted for us priests to participate in civil rights demonstration, again, my disobedience, my civil disobedience, propelled me to go to Washington, D.C. with a couple of my friends. We were very afraid because the rumors were there were going to be riots, people would make death threats, and there was going to be all kinds of terrible stuff happening. But in a sense, I was more afraid of my Cardinal Archbishop at that time, whose name was Cardinal McIntyre, who was kind of a very prejudiced guy from New York who had been assigned to Los Angeles. But anyway, so I went to the March on Washington with my friends. It was a very hot day. Oh, it was a hot day. And there were buses of people coming in from Maine and from Mississippi, from Oregon, from Alabama. And we were all congregating on Constitution Avenue by the Washington Monument. And then we started marching. 250,000 of us started marching down Constitution Avenue. I was in the same line with Jackie Robinson, who had broken the colored line in baseball, in professional baseball, which had been one of my loves as a child, was baseball. So we were singing at that time, what do you want? We want freedom. When did you want it? We want it now. And then we sang, we shall overcome. And it was a very hot day, and a lot of people were giving speeches. And at the very end, they introduced Martin Luther King, who said 17 times, I have a dream that someday the Catholics and Protestants and the Jews and Gentiles will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. All right. And he said 17 times about freedom and justice. And he kind of electrified the whole audience. And so I went back to my parish and started preaching how we need to be active. And then I formed groups of Catholics and Protestants and blacks that would meet in each other's homes. And we got to know each other. And that was some action that we took in those days because we were supporting fair housing laws because certain real estate laws forbade blacks to live in certain neighborhoods. So I'm just saying that really changed my life being in the March on Washington with 250,000 people. Oh, my goodness.
Well, then, how did you feel when he was assassinated in 1968?
Well, good is never done except at the expense of those who do it.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is never spoken except at the expense of those who speak it. So in a sense, Martin Luther King, in being a modern prophet and being a modern saint, put himself out in areas of danger to his personal life. A few days before he was assassinated, he was still doing his thing he was trying to organize the sanitary workers somewhere in Tennessee or something like that. And he almost had a premonition that even though he was only 39 years old, that he wasn't going to live much longer. And so, when we heard about his assassination, it was like when we heard about when John F. Kennedy was shot. It's a real changer, in society.
Yeah.
When somebody who is so charismatic and such a great leader is taken from us, it was almost like he became more alive after he died, in the sense that his words, his teachings kind of permeated all of us. And, every year we do celebrate Martin Luther King's birthday, and we always talk about how much progress we've made, but we also say there's more work to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly the terrible treatment of blacks by various police departments has been very, very disturbing over the years. Not that all police are like this. I've even been thinking maybe we ought to have the police department made up of women. Because women would not have all this testosterone in them, want to be out killing people and all that sort of thing. They would be more tender, more understanding, and that's just a thought that came to my
Well,
attention.
after you were a priest, you got married to mom, which meant you had to leave the priesthood, but you became a psychologist, right, and became a therapist. So you did continue the work of helping people and helping those underserved. So how do you think that experience shapes your views today?
Well, yeah, okay. So as a parish priest, I was always for the underdog. I don't know why. Even those in the church that somehow were on the margin, I was always trying to figure out ways that they could feel welcome, regardless of what their various technical status was. So I was always in the poorer neighborhoods and trying to organize people and organize food banks. And also I did a lot of counseling as a priest, not that I was trained at that time, but a lot of people look to their priest for solving their personal problems, their marital problems, their problems with their teenagers, problems with their parents, problems with their kids. So I got myself trained by attending classes on Saturday to understand human behavior better. So it was kind of natural after 15 years as a parish priest and then getting married, kind of losing my job, right? It wasn't that I stopped being a priest. I just lost my job. So it was natural for me to get my licenses and to become a therapist and get my licenses to teach. So I've always been in kind of the helping profession. I became not only a therapist, I also became a social worker, and I became very much aware of what we call the working poor, including the white.
Yeah.
When we talk about the war on poverty, which we evolved into the 1960s, under President Lyndon Johnson, they developed the war on poverty. The vast majority of people who were poor were actually white in Appalachia, in a lot of poorer parts of America. I mean, when you really look at it, it wasn't just the minorities. So when I became director of the West Side Neighborhood Center with federal funds that were there to help the poor, not only give money out of charity, but you can give a person a fish and they eat for a day, but if you teach them how to fish, they can
Mm-hmm.
eat for the rest of their life. So the idea was to give people of all races and colors the tools they need to get out of poverty, to get educated, to get working skills. And a lot of the nurses' aides, we trained them to be LVNs and eventually RNs, raising their skill levels. So, that was part of what I was doing. So I continued my work in the helping profession at the same time, being very blessed with a wonderful wife who was always very supportive. And all of a sudden, we have a number of beautiful children. When we got married, we decided to find an integrated neighborhood to live in. And at that time, there was a black
Mm-hmm.
who was a mayor of Cerritos. So we
Ah.
settled in Cerritos. And I remember you kids visiting some friends in Orange County and say, "What's wrong out here? Everybody's white." Because you were raised in Cerritos, where it was very, very mixed at that time.
Let me get back to George Floyd. I know you spent many, many years protesting for civil rights in this country. Like, I know you marched with Martin Luther King, but also you fasted with Cesar Chavez, and you did a lot for the gay and lesbian community. How do you view the current situation? Can you share some of your thoughts around the George Floyd murder and the aftermath?
Well, again, it's such a huge subject. There's so many
Yeah.
aspects of it. When I saw this picture of the knee being placed into the throat, into the neck for George Floyd, I said, "Oh my God, this is going to have legs. This is going to spread. This is going to create enormous, enormous uproar." Well, in a sense, that's good. Look at all the people who have peacefully marched and are beginning to address these issues. I think it's very heartwarming to even see police chiefs and sheriffs bending the knee and joining the protesters. I think these are great signs of hope. It's kind of like an awakening. All of a sudden, people get awake. You mean today there's still all this prejudice? There's still all
Yeah.
this abuse of power? I mean, I've always been one to try to attack the abuse of power, people who abuse their position and take advantage of others. So there's a great awareness that has arisen. I think a lot of good is going to come out of this bad. When we calm down and because every new young like your children, okay,
Yeah.
right now they don't know anything, but they're going to grow up, and every new generation has to relearn these lessons of love and acceptance, and we're all together, we're all human beings, beyond being like an ARA, beyond being that, or beyond being a
Mm-hmm.
Californian or even an American. We're individual miracles of the universe. And if we can teach people that, I pledge allegiance to the earth and to all the species for which it stands. One world, all together, with food and sustenance for all. What if we said that every day rather than pledge allegiance to one particular country or
Well,
one
do you
particular
think
nationality?
do you think that progress has been made over the last, I guess, 70 years since you've been doing this?
Well, yes, I think a lot of project progress is made, but we have each new generation. We also have the forces of like skinheads, yeah, white supremacists, and we have those particular groups. There are people who still are very, very biased, and I had a heated discussion with a rabbi recently over, is this hate or is this simply deep-seated prejudice? Because he was insisting that this is hate. People hate. And I was insisting just people are extremely uninformed. They don't think beyond on any deep level. Their level of thinking is only on the soundbite. So they see Mr. Trump with a Bible in front of church. They say, "Oh my God, this must be God there." Did you see that picture of Trump in front of a church with a
Oh,
Bible?
yeah, yeah,
I mean, what the hell? This guy doesn't know what's in the Bible. I
yeah.
mean, if you open it up, it says, "Welcome the stranger," right? It says feed the hungry. It says
Yeah.
visit the sick. So many wonderful. It says everyone is my brother or sister. Love one another as I have loved you. Did that Mr. Trump ever read that Bible? I mean, I have to be careful what I'm saying because I don't know what you can do with my recorded video.
Well, let me ask you, how do you think that we as white people can help right now?
Doing charity, getting out and maybe helping some program, donating money.
Right now, the police for many years have been killing black people and getting away with it. Do you think there's anything that could be done in the police force? Some history classes, some
Well,
psychology classes?
you have to upper the standards to be a policeman. If you don't have a high school diploma and you're looking for a job and you get into the police and you're not that sensitive, I mean, obviously police training, like any kind of training, we can always improve. How do you keep out of positions of power and authority people who are incompetent or deeply prejudiced or
Yeah.
have their own serious biases. But police departments have been getting much more of the budgets of cities. And so they
Hmm.
are acquiring all this federal military equipment. And it's almost like they're becoming soldiers rather than being peace officers. I don't know if you
Yeah.
saw some of the pictures of these tanks, but why do these city police need to have tanks?
Well, that's another point I want to bring up. A lot of these protests have been peaceful, and then some places they've resorted to the riots and looting. But do you think that's been skewed by the media? Maybe the media is just showing more of the rioting and looting than the actual peaceful protest?
Well, that's the media is a big subject because the media supposedly is to be objective and not be biased. But on the one hand, you have MSNBC, and the other hand, you have Fox News, then you have CNN, and so you have a media that is funded by private interests. It's just like businesses have a social responsibility. Facebook has a social responsibility. Twitter has a social responsibility to try to be as fair and objective as possible and not just let the profit motive dominate. But, there's a definite good role that the media has in giving us information. On the other hand, to blow up people running into stores and stealing stuff and make that the issue rather than the issue of police brutality or police overreaction. I mean,
Hmm.
unfortunately, this is a side effect. I remember going back to the Watts riots. That was before you were born. But going back to the Watts riots and to the Rodney King riots after that verdict was given of Rodney King, there was a certain amount of looting that went on, and it does seem to be some kind of a side effect of people who don't fully realize that their actions are changing the subject, are changing the dialogue, and and we encourage all those maybe it's a lesson for all people to, if you steal, you should really give it back. And once you did things that maybe your friends encourage you, hey, let's go rob these stores, or whatever it's been.
Hmm.
I don't think we should get distracted by the looters, although some people say the looters are a well organized group and they have their own media where they communicate with each other, where they can go to take advantage of this situation. Anyway, am I answering your question? Or maybe not.
Yeah. So our country was built on the backs of slaves. What do you think that 400 years of oppression has done to the blacks' mental health state?
Yeah. What effect this has on an individual growing up and their identity. A lot of people get beyond their identity. I mean, like you said, if they, when I would be trying to go from one parish to another, people would always ask, "Well, what are you?" And I
Hmm.
would say, "I am a unique miracle of the universe." No, they wanted to know, well, what is your nationality? Are you
What do you identify as?
I identify as Charlie, unique miracle of the universe, right? I mean, I have sub identities, okay, so I'm male, but I don't want to be judged by, like one lady said to me, you men. I said, wait a minute, I'm not you men. I'm, I'm a man, but I'm also Charlie, a unique human being. So Again, to get beyond our prejudice so we don't judge people by groups, how do you do you identify as an American? Do you identify as a Democrat? Do you identify as a Christian or as a Catholic or things like that? Okay.
Well, do you think that racism will ever be resolved in this country, or it's just going to be something that each generation has to deal with?
Well, I think each generation has to deal with it. I mean, we are inheritors of the United States of slavery and of segregation, right? But the world has, when you study history, the world has always historically had to deal with new groups, with migration, with immigration, the leaving of the Israelites from Egypt, into the so-called promised land. I mean, migration has always been an issue, and new people have always been an issue, and tribalism, and that's a way for the tribe to control the people, is to say,
Mm-hmm.
you belong to this group, so you have to act this way. Hopefully, we didn't teach our children that you have to marry a Syrian, a Lebanese. I don't think any of our 5 kids married a Syrian Lebanese, did they?
Nope.
That's an interesting issue. In fact, I don't think we taught you guys anything. You just. I mean, I don't think we taught you any prejudices, did we? Did we teach you prejudice?
I'm sure that there were some, but nothing out loud.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. You get, yeah. I mean, as parents, we had friends among all different groups. We lived in an integrated neighborhood, which hopefully said something. All children have to grow up answering this question: Who am I?
Mm-hmm.
And who are all these other people? And what's it all about for me? And how do I fit in? And how am I different? Can I be my own person? That was the book written by Carl Rogers, this great psychotherapist, on becoming a person. How do you really become your own person so you're not locked into some kind of identity that all blondes are like this, or all redheads are like that, or all blacks are like this, or all go on and on and on and on. Like I always say in the church, there's room for all of us. Like I ride on the left wing of the Holy Spirit, so I'm barely hanging in
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thanks for your time, Dad. I just wanted to get your perspective because your age, number one, you are almost 90 in like a couple months. And you did have some unique experiences marching on Washington and spending many years as a civil rights activist. So anyway, thanks, Dad, once again for your time.
Well, you're most welcome, and God bless you, and Kai, and Diane. Hopefully, we can all learn, even at my age, what we can do. It's better to light a candle than curse the darkness. So the point is, what can we do to continue to make society a little bit better because we are in it? So thank you very much. God bless. Have a nice rest of the day. Have a nice rest of the day. Have a nice rest of the day. Have a nice rest of the